You give everything and still feel replaceable, like the one who gives but never truly owns the game. The harder you try to rise, the deeper you sink into a trap set long before you knew the rules. What Schopenhauer uncovered is not just a secret, it is a ruthless war inside your own mind where the devotion you offer becomes the weapon that strips away your power, silently and relentlessly. Schopenhauer wasn't merely a philosopher obsessed with suffering. He exposed the hidden battlefield between man and woman, a game masked by smiles, soft voices, and quiet controls. True strength here isn't force or noise, but a still will that bends your own desires until they imprison you. He claimed women wield a power invisible but absolute, twisting the male will as iron is shaped under fire. This is no old tale. Today, science confirms these harsh realities. Research from world-class universities like Harvard reveals how women's soft power, a subtle but commanding influence over emotions and decisions, often dwarfs the effect of overt force. This shadowy force shapes your choices before you even notice you've surrendered. Have you ever wondered why? Despite your efforts, your presence seems less valued, your voice softer in the conversations that matter. You are not alone in feeling this quiet invisibility. This is not just your burden, but a widespread condition of men caught in this invisible war and emotional suffocation that is hard to name but impossible to ignore. Today you will confront a raw truth, a quiet agony of being endlessly needed but never fully enough. You'll face the shame you try to hide, the confusion sewn into your soul as you unwittingly wear the chains disguised as freedom. You will unravel the hidden threads pulling you into roles built to trap and silence you while you cling to the illusion of control. This is the ugly reality of a war you never consented to fight. Carl Jung warned us about the dark dance between anima and shadow, the secret exchange between man and woman beneath daily life. The eternal feminine is no mere myth. It is a mirror reflecting your deepest fears, desires, and vulnerabilities. This image has controlled your story far longer than you realize. Hold on, the truths you'll hear are sharp and unyielding. They will shatter the comforting lies that have guarded your lost power for too long. The chaos you dread is the fire forging your throne. The game you face is older, harsher, and more cunning than you suspect. Seeing it clearly is your first step toward the freedom you crave. It helps more than you imagine. Remember, true power isn't what you've been told. It's the strength to see the shadows, to understand the unseen wars, and to break free of the chains made invisible by desire. The question is no longer who holds the power, but whether you can rise from the ashes of this unseen battle, learning to wield it consciously instead of being shattered by it. Let's begin. You move through life thinking your strength is in your ability to endure, to give, to be the unbreakable one. Yet the more you give, the heavier the weight of invisibility presses in. For years you have worn the armor of provider and protector, believing it would earn you place and respect. But the truth is colder. This armor only makes you more invisible, or easily absorbed into the background, while the world, especially the relationships that matter most, move on as if you are a replaceable part in someone else's story. The illusion of fragility is the deadliest disguise. You see need as weakness, pain as something to protect, softness as something to shield. But Schopenhauer saw beneath. What you are protecting is not always wounded, but often a form of power so subtle, it can consume your will before you ever sense danger. Vulnerability, which you have been taught to comfort and defend, becomes the thread that binds you in a knot of obligations you can never truly untie. Each act of rescue offers a dose of approval, a fleeting wave of gratitude, but those moments are quickly lost, leaving only more need, more requests, and less of yourself. You become addicted to offering help, to proving that you are needed, to feeling important through someone else's dependence. But as soon as you step into that role, you are already losing. True control has slipped into hands that appear weaker, yet move the game pieces with unspoken precision. You see her struggle and feel compelled to step in, not knowing that every saving gesture only feeds the dynamic that drains your core. The gentle sigh, the quiet confession of difficulty, becomes an invitation for you to surrender your time, your energy, even your own dreams. Over time, you can't even tell where your desires end and someone else's begin. Psychological research has repeatedly confirmed what Schopenhauer warned: when one person consistently assumes the role of caretaker, they grow emotionally dependent on being needed, eventually losing touch with their own needs and values. In a study conducted at the University of California, men who habitually overcared in relationships reported high levels of resentment, identity loss, and depression. These are not isolated failures of character. They are symptoms of a larger trap designed by the invisible hand of social scripts and psychic games. What's most haunting is how silently this process occurs. It does not announce itself. There is no betrayal, no dramatic exit. Instead, you are gradually erased, replaced by your own usefulness. You fade just as you try hardest to matter. The more indispensable you become, the less you are truly seen. The cruel paradox: a life spent chasing significance eventually dissolves into a feeling of vanishing, bit by bit, as if you have been living as a ghost among the living. The question you must ask yourself is uncomfortable. Are you helping, or are you handing over your power in exchange for the illusion of love and meaning? Can you recognize the moment where generosity becomes your own undoing? The first step toward breaking free is to see how the fantasy of being the rescuer keeps you bound. When you stop mistaking neediness for invitation, when you learn to say no, you begin to reclaim more than your voice. You reclaim your entire being. If you were searching for a sign to finally step out of this shadow and choose yourself, consider this. Subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you imagine. Emotional martyrdom runs as deep as human relationships themselves. Yet few understand how silent suffering becomes the most potent form of control, sharper than any open threat. Schopenhauer warned that pain, when wielded as emotional currency, creates bonds nearly impossible to dissolve. It's a game where apparent fragility serves as the perfect mask for manipulation. When you witness someone who constantly sacrifices themselves, who would suspect that their silence, heavy with suffering, often becomes the prison that holds you in cycles of guilt and obligation. You might believe your responsibility is to ease their pain after all. Society shaped you to be the hero, the savior. But the hidden truth cuts deeper. This emotional martyr uses their own pain to exercise invisible dominion over your choices. This guilt cycle operates as a silent trap where unspoken expectations and emotional demands lock you in. A prison without bars. You become guard, prisoner, and victima. Tragic trinity perpetuating the erosion of your very being. The more you try to break free, the deeper you seem to sink into this destructive dynamic. Harvard studies reveal how emotional blackmail operates as an often unconscious but highly effective behavior that manipulates the human brain's limbic system. This mechanism silences your legitimate anger, redirecting your energy toward excessive caregiving and self-sacrifice, all to keep the cycle intact. This suffering can be so expertly disguised that it escapes even your notice. What appeared to be humility or fragility actually functions as a power mechanism, controlling your emotional freedom. It's a cruel paradox. The person who seems most vulnerable often holds the most power in manipulation's invisible game. Understanding this marks your first step toward breaking the cycle and reclaiming your autonomy. You must recognize the role you play in this emotional theater and, above all, accept that you deserve escape from this silently corrosive trap. Remember, true freedom begins when you reject the martyr's role and stop feeding the guilt flame that keeps you captive. Saying enough isn't selfishness. It's an act of survival and self-mastery. Don't fall for the illusion that this suffering must be carried in silence. Real strength emerges from recognizing your own pain and the power to liberate yourself from it. Allow yourself to question the dynamics sustaining your martyrdom. Question why you continue this cycle even as it destroys you from within. Consciousness becomes your greatest ally in fighting this invisible emotional prison. When you begin seeing these hidden traps, you'll find yourself on the path to transforming weakness into an inexhaustible source of inner strength, because recognizing the game is the first step to winning it. Prepare to dive into this truth. It won't comfort you, but it will set you free. You must understand that playing victim can be the most dangerous mask someone wears to manipulate and control. The conscious or unconscious use of pain to dominate can transform suffering into an instrument of power, a silent weapon few can see and fewer still dare challenge. This cycle can be broken, but it demands courage to face the shadows and abandon the role that you, or whoever stands beside you, insists on playing. There exists a subtle trap that ensnares many men: the addiction to being indispensable. Have you ever wondered why, despite all the clear evidence of emotional exhaustion, you remain trapped in this vicious cycle, surrendering daily to an endless quest to be needed, to be essential? The hidden desire for power merges with the need for external validation, creating a seemingly impossible cycle to break. Nietzsche would say this obsession is a distorted expression of the will to power. Instead of seeking your true inner strength, you feed a dependency that binds you to another, losing yourself in the process. The need to be indispensable doesn't arise from strength, but from a deep fear of not being enough on your own. This emotional addiction creates a disguised dependency where you become hostage to another's desires. Your worth ceases to be internal and becomes dependent on constant approval from others. With each request fulfilled, each rescue performed, you strengthen invisible chains that reduce your autonomy. Neuroscience has unveiled how the male brain responds to social dependency. Recent studies indicate that the sensation of being needed activates reward centers, releasing dopamine and offering a chemical payoff that becomes addictive. This neurochemical reaction may explain the difficulty of breaking the cycle, even when it causes obvious suffering. Moreover, this dependency generates a silent fear of the real autonomy of the woman beside you. After all, her independence threatens the masculine identity built around the role of protector and savior. This conflict creates invisible tensions that slowly corrode the relationship and feed dynamics of veiled control. The paradox is cruel. You sacrifice yourself to maintain an illusion of control, but this surrender gradually undermines your true power. The pursuit of indispensability is ultimately an escape from your own inner power, an insecure refuge that eventually leads to emotional exhaustion. This addiction transforms into an invisible trap that binds you not just in behavior, but in identity. Becoming indispensable is paradoxically losing yourself. The man who clings to this need feeds a profound inner void, as his value ceases to be seen as something natural, coming from his being, and becomes dependent on another's gaze. Losing this dependency is terrifying because it reveals an internal space that can no longer be filled by external approval. The body and mind respond to this dynamic like a chemical dependency, where the brain's reward system reinforces behaviors that guarantee the sensation of being needed, creating a cycle difficult to break. You feel momentary satisfaction, but soon return the hunger for more recognition, more necessity, more control. Recognizing this addiction to being indispensable is the first step toward transformation. Accepting that your worth is unconditional and doesn't depend on the actions of those around you represents an awakening to a new form of existence. It takes courage to confront the deepest fears that bind you, to look in the mirror and accept that true strength comes from within, from the capacity to be whole, even in the absence of constant external validation. This is both the challenge and the liberation. When you break these invisible chains, you not only free yourself, but allow your relationship to transform from a chain of dependencies into a balanced dance of respect and autonomy. It's not about distance, but about more truthful and sincere encounters. Now, your journey to abandon the addiction to being indispensable begins here. The man you avoid being is waiting to be discovered and liberated. Are you ready for this encounter? There exists a silent theater that many men don't perceive, playing supporting actor in their own lives while others direct the spotlight toward themselves. Have you ever felt the invisible weight of carrying responsibilities that were never yours, solving problems you didn't cause, only to be seen as the helper while others receive the credit. Schopenhauer didn't speak directly about this, but his philosophy on will and illusion explains much of this dynamic. The theater of incompetence is the play where you work backstage in your own story while others perform on the stage of your life. It's a cruel role reversal where your energy drains and your voice becomes an inaudible whisper. This dynamic is reinforced by a psychological mechanism known as selective responsibility attribution. You are chosen, often unconsciously, to carry the burden because you're perceived as too capable or too willing. The result is silent exhaustion of fatigue that often goes unrecognized. Even by yourself, research in social psychology shows that people who take on extra responsibilities in social and professional environments frequently feel undervalued and invisible. The sense of injustice grows but is rarely expressed, creating a cycle of silence and submission. Moreover, this theater is recycled daily through compliance and silent acceptance, while the persona you display is that of the tireless helper, an invisible hero who receives no applause to break this performance. The first step is recognizing your participation, as unconscious as it is vital. You must understand that by assuming all responsibilities, you surrender narrative control to others. Your exhaustion is the price paid for this invisible exchange, limiting your involvement, establishing clear boundaries, and observing your own reactions are crucial tools for reclaiming the leading role. Abandoning this character isn't an act of selfishness, but recovery of your true power. You are not just the helper. Backstage, you are the director of your own life. Recognize this truth and begin acting from it. This is the opportunity to rewrite the script, refuse the imposed role, and reclaim the stage that was always yours. The greatest challenge is freeing yourself from the illusory comfort this role offers. The sensation of being useful and necessary, even when it costs you your voice and inner strength. Awakening comes with discomfort, the decision that your time and energy are worth more than the decorative role assigned to you. Reclaiming your power means stepping from shadow to center stage, assuming the protagonist role in your life with courage and clarity. Remember, change begins with consciousness. By recognizing that you have the right to your own story, you initiate a process of self-rediscovery, rebirth into a role that truly belongs to you. Don't allow others to write your script. Take the pen and declare yourself the author of your life. There exists a war that never announces itself, yet wages deep battles in your mind and soul. Have you ever felt that constant mental exhaustion? The sensation that something is being destroyed inside you, even without a visible blow? Refined emotional violence is an invisible weapon that operates devastatingly, leaving scars no one can see. Schopenhauer spoke extensively about pain and suffering, but rarely delved into the subtlety of invisible wounds. This silent war manifests through attacks that leave no physical marks but drain your energy, undermine your self-esteem, and corrode your inner peace. One of the greatest instruments in this war is programmed social isolation. Cutting your bonds with friends, family, and support networks doesn't always happen abruptly or obviously. Often, it's a gradual and subtle process where you're slowly distanced, discredited, or manipulated into disconnecting from your own emotional resources. This silent separation creates a dangerous void where loneliness becomes a prison you barely notice. Another blow is reality. Rewriting, gaslighting, a perverse tactic where your perception is questioned, making you doubt what you saw, heard, or felt. This process erodes your confidence in your own mind, destroying your internal reference point and consequently, your sense of identity. The constant wear caused by this emotional instability creates controlled chaos, an environment where mental exhaustion prevents you from clearly seeing the abuse you suffer. This slow manipulation is perhaps the cruelest of all because you become hostage to a fabricated reality where violence is invisible to everyone except those who practice it. Recent psychological studies confirm that prolonged exposure to these conditions leads to anxiety disorders, depression, and even psychological collapse. The human brain isn't prepared to resist a war where the enemy is invisible and the weapons are subtle as shadows. Recognizing this psychic war is the first step to recovering your strength. You need to learn to identify the signs, strengthen your support networks, and reaffirm your perception of reality. Remember, silence is not peace. The absence of marks is not the absence of wounds. Your mind and soul deserve respect, care, and protection. You are not alone in this invisible battle. Knowledge is a shield, and consciousness, a sword. Arm yourself to fight for your inner balance, because this war won't be won with brute force, but with emotional intelligence and self-knowledge. Prepare to recognize the invisible hands that manipulate your emotions and establish defenses that protect you from these silent attacks. Consciousness is your best weapon in rebuilding what was broken and affirming your unquestionable worth. There exists a crucial point where even the strongest man finds the thin line between resistance and surrender. Have you noticed how sometimes, after a long emotional battle, the strength that seemed unshakable begins to dissolve slowly until what remains is a shadow of submission? This transition doesn't happen by chance, but is the result of deep and systematic wearing down that Schopenhauer glimpsed in complex power relations. The man, trapped in social and internal expectations, often cannot recognize that the resistance he displays is, in practice, a wearing down that brings surrender closer. The hidden fear of losing control, being vulnerable before the figure who exercises emotional power, creates an invisible prison as effective as a physical one. This moment of surrender can manifest in subtle ways: resigned quietness before decisions that don't belong to him, acceptance of criticism that erodes self-esteem, abdication of his own desires in the name of illusory peace. Each concession, however small, undermines the ground of strength until it disappears almost without warning. Studies in psychology and neuroscience indicate that chronic stress linked to these dynamics contributes to alterations in cognitive and emotional processes, affecting decision-making capacity and self-confidence. Psychological submission, therefore, is not a sign of weakness, but a reflection of survival mechanisms facing unbearable pressures. This surrender, however, doesn't need to be an endpoint. Self-knowledge, emotional clarity, and reappropriation of will are paths that can reverse this trajectory. By recognizing the where and accepting vulnerability as part of the process, man can rebuild his strength on more solid and conscious foundations. Nietzsche would encourage seeing in this weakening the opportunity for spiritual rebirth, a metamorphosis. From the old man to a new version that accepts shadow without giving up light. Abandoning the illusion of total control doesn't mean defeat, but rather the wisdom to choose your battles and recognize your limits without losing essence. It's an invitation to a strength that doesn't nullify vulnerability, but integrates it as part of authenticity. This is the moment too. Understand that true strength lies not in domination or blind resistance, but in the capacity to surrender and rise again with full consciousness and internal decision. Are you ready for this conscious surrender to transform what seemed like weakness into immeasurable new power? The journey doesn't end here. It simply changes direction. Embracing this conscious surrender means allowing yourself reinvention and true growth. Detached from old bonds and suffocating expectations. It's a call to the man who wants to be whole, who seeks true dominion, that which is born from acceptance, wisdom, self-love. This new path demands courage to face your own shadow, to look inside without fear, and to rebuild the will to power on new foundations. It's authentic and sustaining. The journey toward this reinvention will be full of challenges, but it will also be the liberation that makes everything worthwhile. Are you willing to face it, Carl? Jung taught us that every man carries within himself the eternal image of woman, not of a specific woman, but of an archetype that profoundly influences his emotions and decisions. This anima shapes not only his relationships, but his own understanding of what strength, power, and vulnerability mean. Ignoring this shadow means allowing it to find other bodies for revenge, perpetuating invisible cycles of pain and silent domination. Schopenhauer, in turn, revealed that the feminine will to life operates through manipulation of masculine will, not as malice, but as a primal instinct for survival and species perpetuation. This dynamic creates deep emotional traps. where man is drawn into psychic games that drain his strength without him realizing it. The dark truth is that many men become willing accomplices in their own domestication, trapped in roles that offer the illusion of power and control, but actually weaken and isolate them. The path to freedom passes through conscious recognition of these hidden games and the courage to confront and integrate one's own shadow. Jung reminds us that individualization, the process of becoming a complete self, demands courage to face what is repressed. Nietzsche complements this vision by affirming that true strength comes from living a life that is yours. It's embracing chaos and order without illusions. This is the truth that liberates. The chaos you fear is the very fire that forges your throne. The strength that seems lost is merely dormant, waiting for the moment of conscious reinvention. The symbol that should echo in your mind is the man who breaks the mirror where he saw only a displaced reflection, and finally sees his true image, neither victim nor executioner, but an integral being who masters his shadow. Allow yourself this uncomfortable and necessary encounter. Let the tension of this truth work within you, peeling away layers of self-deception and fear, until only the iron essence of authenticity remains. This journey is not for the weak, but for those who truly desire to free themselves from the invisible chains of emotional domination. It's a call to assume internal power, even if it means first losing the false power one holds. If you felt the weight of this truth, leave your comment below. Share your experience, your struggle, or insight. Your voice is an essential part of this transformation. And don't forget to subscribe to the page to continue receiving content that doesn't comfort, but liberates. The journey continues, and your transformation is just the beginning. Be ready to face the shadows and emerge stronger than ever. Your participation in bringing light to these truths is vital. Don't underestimate the power of your voice in building a community that seeks emotional freedom and self-mastery. We are together in this arduous and necessary journey. Be an active part of this transformation